This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya, from the Photo School of Government. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning. But we also take a look at some of the political pieces that we call cartoons. Today, the 2nd of September, 2022. And I'm 2M.
I am 2J.
And I'm GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Chebukati is a hero, lawyers say. In the Standard, Ruto, IEBC defense as judges seek answers. In the Star, Ruto to judges, Raila, casework of fiction. And in the People Daily, we played by the rules, Ruto, IEBC.
Jose Camago. Who is he? According to DCI, a few days before the election, 3 Venezuelans were arrested at JKIA. The 3 had in their possession IEBC election material hidden in personal luggage. The 3 Venezuelans, identified as Jose Camago Castellanos, Gustavo Rodriguez, Garcia, Salvador Javier, and Sosa Suarez, are employees of Smartmatic. Today, we shall single out Jose Camago, only because he was a subject matter in today's Supreme Court proceedings. According to Juliet Soweto, in Kangema constituency, Gasharaigo Primary School, Stream 2, Jose Camago's name appeared next to Form 34A. An independent check by us here at the Photo School of Government on the IEBC portal does indeed agree with Juliet Soweto's findings. The name Jose Camago has clearly or can clearly be seen at the top left side of Form 34A. In addition to this, according to Senior Counsel Philip Mulgo, Jose Camago only appears in the logs submitted by IEBC. In fact, Mulgo told us that Camago appeared in the IEBC logs before, during, and after the election. Question is, what was a Smartmatic employee doing next to a Form 34A in an IEBC portal? It just so happens that it is not just the Petitioners' Council that found Jose Camago in IEBC servers, but so the DCI. DCI, in a forensic report to on IEBC servers, told us that there were 21 persons that had IEBC credential logins. Of the 21, Jose Camago is one of them. Again, I ask, who is this Jose Camago? But I have another thought. Philip Mulgo told us that on Form 34A of Gasharaigo Primary School, the UDA agent signed the form on 7 August 2022. That is 2 days before the August 9th elections. Now, if this is true, that a Form 34A was signed before the election, this is similar to what happened in the 2016 Filipino election. In fact, in the Filipino election, presidential election results streamed in a day before the election. In both the Kenyan and Filipino elections, Smartmatic provided the election technology. Back to Juliet Soweto. In her submission, Ms. Soweto told us that 11,000 Form 34As have the same KMSKIT ID. I'll give you an example. In Chesikaki Primary School, Mount Elgon, Bungoma County, and in Rugoma Primary School in Nyeri Town, KMSKIT ID number F23050 MM00204133 send data from 2 polling stations on the same day. These 2 locations in Mount Elgon and in Nyeri are about 400 kilometers apart. What's my point here? Your guess is as good as mine.
I thought you were going to tell us the point.
It's very clear.
Yes.
Issue number 6, as outlined by the Supreme Court, is whether the IEBC carried out its mandate in accordance with Article 138(3)(c) and 138(10) of the Constitution. Article 138 speaks to the procedure at a presidential election. Section 3C states that in a presidential election, after the counting the votes in the polling station, the IEBC shall tally and verify the count and declare the result. Here, the responsibility is directed at the Commission as a whole. When we look at Article 138(10), it states that within 7 days after the presidential election, the chairperson of the IEBC shall declare the result of the election. Here, the responsibility lies with the chairperson. The law is clear. So why then has the Supreme Court directed this process to look at these 2 subsections? A plain reading of the law would see this as a 2-step activity. Step 1 the Commission jointly tallies and verifies. And based on that first step, Step 2 gives the chairperson the authority to declare the results. But the issue before the court, and the way they have framed this issue, is to question whether IEBC carried out its mandate in accordance with those two pieces of the Constitution.
Correct.
So what are the arguments? According to the four commissioners, the first step that requires their cooperation did not take place. Therefore, whatever actions Chebukati engaged in are in direct contravention of the Constitution.
Yes.
Through their lawyer, Issa Mansour, the four commissioners detailed how the CEO, Hussein Marjan, gave them the final Form 34C without giving them the chance to verify its contents. There was a lack of transparency, and they were locked out of a constitutional process that was meant to be done jointly.
Yes.
On the other side, according to Gidon Wigai, the IEBC chairperson has what he calls executive power, but he does not define what this means. A good example is the President of Kenya, who also enjoys executive authority and executive power, but not in a vacuum. That authority has limits. And that role is also checked and monitored by the other branches of government, the legislature and the judiciary.
Correct.
And this was at the heart of the question asked by Justice Smokin Wanjala yesterday.
In the morning, you did really argue quite strongly that when it comes to verification, tallying, and declaration of the result, the presidential election result, that really, if you look at the law in your interpretation of the Article 138 and the jurisprudence that you say emanates from this court, you seemed to be arguing that that is strictly within the purview of the chair's mandate, and that really these other commissioners, let's say the remaining, the six commissioners, really ought not to be around that, because that's a role preserved for the chair.
His question was very simple. If Chebukati is the so-called king of this process, who is checking what he does? Are IEBC and Chebukati one and the same, such that the commissioners can be neglected to serving tea and watching media instead of their job to monitor and participate?
Yes.
Now, the problem with claiming, as Gidon Wigai did, that Chebukati has executive power is answered in the famous Maina Kiai case. The Supreme Court upheld, and I quote, that to suggest that there is some law that empowers the chairperson as an individual to alone correct, vary, confirm, alter, modify, or adjust is to donate an illegitimate power. Illegitimate.
Yes.
Not excessive, not wrong, not unfair. Illegitimate. Ultimately, the court will have to tell us who is more powerful, the majority or the chairperson.
Correct.
And this is important not only for future elections, but also in the event that they nullify the results. These judges are very smart. We give them credit this time around. And their questions are very telling.
Yes.
Justice Mwilu repeatedly asked about the link between the four commissioners and Article 140. This article states that if the Supreme Court invalidates the election, a new one shall be held within 60 days. But as it stands, the commission is divided. Can they even conduct another election if we don't close this matter? Otherwise, we are destined to make the same mistakes again and again. Now, in the end, we cannot speak to what the Supreme Court will decide. But are they giving us signals? At the close of proceedings today, Justice Mwilu said the following, and again I quote, "At the Supreme Court, we divide our roles so that we don't speak at the same time. We consider ourselves equal and none of us has veto power. But of course, we have a team leader." Loaded statement or loaded statement?
Loaded statement indeed. And speaking of signals, having analysed the judicial legacy of the post-Maraga court, A court then nullified an election in 2017, refused to answer to Parliament, and stopped the BBI referendum because it valued process over product. Many of us have been auditing whether the 9 issues framed by the Kwame Court are closer to being resolved. As we near the tail end of the Supreme Court process, ultimately we are all wondering whether there has been clarity on question number 8. And I quote, whether there were irregularities and illegalities of such magnitude as to affect the final result of the presidential election. But what is the threshold? In 2017, the threshold was determined. The Supreme Court found that 10,000 missing Form 34As out of 40,883 were too many. This represented 24% of the available polling stations. They said that this accounted for roughly 5 million votes out of a register of 17.2 million.
Yes.
This placed the number of unaccounted votes at 30% of the voter register. So, has a similar threshold been determined in this election? Or is the Supreme Court operating from a different vision of justice? Now, a critical statement from DCJ Mwilu to Githu Muigai suggests that they might be. Mwilu said,
of course, numbers are critical. They are, for me, they are. Because that is a mandate of 138 for A and B, the threshold. The 50% plus 1. And numbers are important for as long as they are not negated by any other process.
the key word here is process, signaling that this time round the main issue may not be about numbers but about process and the institution that is the IEBC. And the questions posed by the justices affirms this focus on process.
Correct.
For instance, when CJ Kwame asked, and I quote, when we look at Article 138.3c, we see the commissioners have a role to at least look at the tallied results and ask questions whether the president-elect reached the constitutional results. Why didn't the chairman tell Kenyans exactly what happened and tell Kenyans why some commissioners were dissenting? Or when CJ Smoking Wanjala to Mr. Mahat asks, the Venezuelan was accessing the server as part of maintenance. What was he doing? What was he maintaining?
Yes.
Or his other question, Chebukati first mentioned a 65.4% turnout, indicating that this was bound to change as the results kept streaming in. So this percentage should have increased, not decreased. But it didn't. So what happened? How relevant is the turnout to 50% plus 1? These questions can only be determined by judicial interpretation. If we are guided on the recent history of BBI, we know that the Supreme Court decision was both about process and product.
Yes.
The process of initiating a referendum and the product, the changes to the Constitution. Now, the Supreme Court had no problem with the product. Any change to the Constitution is allowable. But the Supreme Court did have a problem with the process of initiating the BBI.
Yes.
What should give us some comfort is that the bench is made up of an uneven number of judges, if you haven't noticed, and they're set to determine the issue by majority decision. Majority decisions are an acknowledgement that there are no right or wrong answers. It is a fail-safe mechanism for what to do when all the judges can't agree. The saying goes that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we will wait.
Very telling, very loaded.
It is. So we had a bunch of headlines. And I want to propose that we actually have a losing headline.
Yes.
Yes. All right.
You want to say it?
And I want to give it to the Daily Nation.
Oh,
That
yes.
says,
Chebukati is a hero. Kindly find us on YouTube and subscribe, but also find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Pang Vita, and Star Times.
see you on Monday when we get the results.
Good.